Thanks. It's good to be in front of everyone today. We're really excited to have two fantastic panelists today. Our topic is innovative paths to enrollment growth. Everyone hasn't been experiencing enrollment growth this year or the last several years. So to hear from two of our colleagues who have, we're going to be able to learn some of their insights into how they market, how they're running their shops, and how they're dealing with staff attrition or burnout even. So we're really excited. This is a part of a series sponsored by myFootpath, the leading organization to re-enroll adult stopout students. We're excited to add this to our repository. Vickie, if you'd introduce yourself, followed by Barb, and I'll get into some questions for the two of you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vickie Cook. I'm the Vice Chancellor for Enrollment and Retention Management at the University of Illinois Springfield.
Hello, everyone. It's a good morning for me still, but it's nice to be here with you all. My name is Barb Roberts. I'm the Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and excited to chat with y'all.
Great, thank you. Well, to get us started, we know there have been some significant enrollment declines, especially for the undergraduate market. As we can see here, since 2019, it's gone down by 1.4 million students. Graduate enrollment's been having a problem as well, and this is all prior to the anticipated demographic cliff due to a reduction in birth rates. We did have a significant decline in enrollment due in large part to questioning of the value of higher education. And what's really exciting today is Illinois traditionally is one of the greatest exporters of students and has in general struggled with enrollments. And Nevada's gone through all sorts of ups and downs as well, based upon, to a large degree, their local population. So we're really excited again to have Barb and Vickie with us. If we take a look at this map here, just a quick, see where you are on the map, folk who are watching this. The dark reds, if you're part of that, you're going, yeah. And if you're in the grays, your peers from the dark red states have their recruiters stationed in your states. So that's why the rents are going up right now. So lots of competition to get students from out of area. It's a very challenging time. Just to highlight what one institution did to get ahead of this some years ago is Northern Arizona University was facing enrollment challenges and traditional enrollment market share decreasing. So they decided to start trying to re-enroll adult students who had stopped out from their institution, partnered with myFootpath. And you can see some pretty promising results there for the institution where they've generated significant net tuition revenue contributions without an outlay of initial funds because it was done through a revenue share. So that's how one institution has addressed this. Barb and Vickie are going to present to us different innovative ways that they've been able to address their enrollment concerns. And these are some of them. What I'd like to do first off is ask Vickie to take us through a few of these different populations, some of them or all of them, and some of the initiatives you've conducted to identify there is market share and what you've done to address them.
Well, the University of Illinois at Springfield has long been a supporter of transfer students from community colleges, and that has been for the entire time that we have been in business as a university. That's been our largest undergraduate population, is our transfer students from community colleges. About 3 years ago, we decided to take a deep dive into what our processing looked like for those students. And what we found was through the years, even though we were strongly still supportive of transfer students from community colleges, we had set up processes and business practices that made it very difficult for students entering from community colleges to come in as transfer students in a way that seemed seamless and easy for the student. And so we have worked very hard for the last 3 years to work on thinking about our policies from a transfer student perspective, reimagining our business practices, really doing a complete business mapping exercise, and then utilizing business automation where it makes sense. Leave our staff to do the pieces that are very, very significant where the human touch is needed, and automate what is possible in the background, and not spend staff dollars on checking the boxes on the background. So that has been a huge component of our strategy. We're also working within our system. So the University of Illinois has 3 separate universities in a system. And we are working on the some college, no credential audience, thinking about what does that mean? How can we appropriately address those students who need to complete a degree, who need to perhaps complete a credential? Maybe that's a micro-credential, maybe that's a certificate program. But what does that look like, and how can we align that more effectively with the workplace? So really thinking about that alignment significantly. We also have some very important strategies and tactics that we are working with our international group. We're partnering with various vendors. We are looking at other opportunities. We are looking to diversify. I think the problem that a lot of smaller institutions like the University of Illinois at Springfield, as a regional public, we tend to get very segmented, and we don't diversify our international student body. Then if there's a problem with whatever the problem might be, visas or changes in that country's economics or politics, then it becomes very difficult to maintain a certain level of international students as part of the balance of the overall student population. And the graduate students is a very important market, both at the international, but also our domestic grad students. So we're working more effectively with our graduate programs, with our graduate public service internship programs to provide strong internships for graduate students. So I'll leave it there, and maybe Barb has some additional thoughts on those audiences.
Well, thanks, Vickie. And I think that you touched on some things in all of those same markets that are things that UNLV is looking at. We are, a large urban research one, high research activity institution with Division I athletics. And so it's a little bit different, but we're doing a lot of the same types of things. So I'll just kind of start in the same order. Community colleges are something that with institutions similar to mine is sort of always an afterthought. They're always just like a fill in as you need them. And the focus has largely traditionally been on your first year cohort. That's the group that you're mapping. Those are the ones that matter. But in the end of things, they all matter. And especially with the cliff and all of those things, transfer students are more and more important. And so I've really been focusing on kind of leveling out our enrollment in terms of do we need to focus all of our growth on the continued increase in the first year cohort? And instead, let's talk about, bringing in more transfer students. And then this is a really big one. And I brought this up at a webinar a couple of days ago with the Chronicle, saying that retention is the new recruitment. It's so overlooked so many times. And I know as enrollment managers that we are not always hands-on. We don't always get to directly impact that retention place, but there are things that conversations that can be had to retain students. But back to transfers, sorry, a little side jaunt there. Back to transfers, I totally agree about having your staff do the things that humans need to do and looking for automation where you can. Not only is it better for staff, it's better for students, it's faster, they get results faster. We've implemented some OCR software to load our transfer transcripts so that it's more seamless, there's less human error. They also are able to get articulations more quickly and get responses more quickly in terms of a decision. We've also adjusted how we're articulating things. We're no longer, if we don't have an articulation rule built, we're no longer kind of farming all of those out to be reviewed by departments to determine what rule it should be to give it a direct one-to-one articulation. We are doing some level of those in-house now within the registrar staff. And that's also increased our turnaround to be able to tell students exactly how things are articulating instead of, oh, it's going to count as credit. We just don't know what yet. And so they're getting it as lower division elective or upper division elective or whatever. We're able to now give better responses to that. We've also really focused on where we can do gen ed waivers. Transfer students are largely coming in with that, first 45 or 60 credits done. And so it's not necessarily worth the time to initially start out doing 2+2s or 3+1s or 1+3s or any of those things. And so instead, we've really approached it in looking at the general education requirements at a system level and how those can equate to our gen eds, and working with our Faculty Senate Gen Ed Committee to waive some of those requirements based on what they've earned at other states and are certified. So that's really kind of some big things with the transfer students. Some college no credential is a brand new area for us, and we are, as I talked about, kind of retention is the new recruitment. We're re-recruiting our stop out students that have some college and no credential, but we are also searching for folks that have some college and no credential. And we're actually starting that by looking at our first year entering cohort. We gather that data. It's required by our state to report on the education level of our students' parents, if they're first gen or not. And so we actually have scraped some of that data and are developing a plan to recruit parents who have some college and no credential to join their student at UNLV. We don't have results of that yet, but I'm super excited to roll it out. I think it's going to be, we'll have a nice snazzy name. Marketing's key. And I think that we're definitely going to see a revenue stream from that group of folks. International is a place that we're diversifying. For sure, we do have partners internationally. We have agents that we're working with in various countries. But I think with the international piece, and something that Vickie touched on, it's super important to look at what countries you're in, and if you are really trying to attract graduate students from those countries, because they are largely, at least for us, coming in looking for they're looking for graduate assistantships. And so in terms of revenue, it's not the kind of revenue generating. Super important to get in and to do research and to help diversify and those things, but it's not going to increase your revenue. And so we definitely search for graduate students in some countries and undergraduate students who are more likely to be revenue generating in other countries where they have more capacity to pay, or where a government agency is helping to assist them to come to the US and study. Graduate students, graduate admission and recruitment was moved to enrollment management about 2 years ago. And I'm happy to say that one of the first things that we did was start telling people that we were here and being in front of people. What a world of difference that's made. And we just keep adding on things incrementally as we need to. And so that's one of the things that we are currently right now outside of graduate assistantships. We don't have any other waiver programs or true scholarship programs for graduate students. We're going to get there. It's going to have to happen. But this year we had 11.5% growth in graduate enrollment simply by getting into the places where they can see us. Joining the centralized application service and just being in front of a wider audience has made a huge difference.
Thanks. With transfer students in community colleges, often there's a rub, sometimes due to funding for the community colleges and certainly other reasons. Do either of you participate in reverse transfer initiatives? And if so, could you speak a little bit about how successful they've been?
Barb, why don't you go ahead and start on this one?
Okay, be happy to. So we are just sort of beginning that. Students have always been able to transfer back and forth. Just our system allows that we have common course numbering, but it's always been, the onus has been on the student to do that. In the past year, I've been working with our local community college and sort of made an agreement of, I'll put on my application if they're transferring from CSN and they give us permission, that every semester we will automatically send back the credits they earn at UNLV until they complete an associate's degree at the local community college where they started. In kind of exchange for that, if you will, the community college agreed to put on their application, where do you intend on transferring to? And the student selects UNLV. I have staff members that are at each of those CSN locations, and those names are going to them as academic advisors, and they are helping the students through that process, making sure they're taking the right courses so that they can transfer seamlessly. We tell them after they finish their associate's degree, they're frankly largely more successful if they do finish their associate's degree. But if they choose to transfer earlier, we can, help them make sure that they're on track and have done all of the right things. It has been successful this far. We've helped the community college get completions, which is what they want. And we saw an increase of about roughly 6% this past fall from that specific community college.
And we're doing many of the same things. Mostly it's trying to not put so much pressure on the student, but allow the student to have some flexibility back and forth, as you have said, Barb. And really for us, it's a constant of working with our community college colleagues on, okay, what have you changed? What have we changed? Where do we need to come back together? And just being on top of the updates that occur and the changes that occur within different processing that is happening. Absolutely. And that communication piece is just critical.
Absolutely. We have an annual process to update all those articulation worksheets back and forth with the community college. But for the first time ever this year, we are actually on November 1st hosting what we're calling a partner event. And we're bringing all of the academic advisors from CSN and their academic leadership to our campus and walking them through our business processes and how their students are fitting into that. And then having a conversation about how else can we make it easier for them as well.
We host a community college leadership symposium once a semester. Right. And then we have all the advisors on our campus for a full day workshop in the summer. And that has made all the difference in that type of communication. So I think you're right on track, Barb, with what you're doing.
Thank you.
Super. A lot of it sounds like it boils down to relationships. Speaking of relationships, we have internal relationships. For an industry right now, it's short-term relationships. 50% of staff are leaving within 6 months. You can see how many leaders, the percentage of leaders have seen increased turnover. Everyone, it looks like, is concerned about how do I keep my staff. We've got, a lot of staff who are having to do the work of more than one person because there are vacancies. Often at some institutions, they've made the hiring process so cumbersome to try to save a month's worth of payroll and benefits, but that has an impact down the stream as well. You can see leadership, and you two are leaders. Your peers are, reporting burnout. Your staff are reporting burnout. Can you talk a little bit about how you're feeling, how your staff are feeling, and what you're doing to make things as good as they can be?
Sure. I think it's really, really important that we don't discount this whole concept as we think about serving our students, because we can't serve our students if we haven't done self-care with our staff and ourselves. And so really thinking about that from ways to improve both my own professional development and how I get recharged when I attend conferences and talk to colleagues. I have a great network within the state, and that also helps recharge me. But then how do I recharge my staff? And really helping them find professional development, feeling like they are doing something important to help us move forward. And you mentioned the budget, Luke. The worst thing that a university can do is start to whittle away at the budget on enrollment management, because we are the tuition and fee revenue generating unit. And if we don't have staff who feel like what they are doing is important to the institution, it can be critical for, it can just be devastating to the entire organization. So we took our turnover rate from about 70% down to this past year was under 5%. And so, but it is a lot of work, and it's just what you said. It's relationship building, not only with staff right in enrollment management, but the way we communicate and collaborate with staff across the university.
I totally agree. I will say that in the last 2 years, it's definitely just improved. I think that through COVID and right after COVID, it was a whole lot. And burnout and turnover was just really extreme in all of my offices within enrollment management, but especially in recruitment. And I do see a turnover with that. I think as people have gotten kind of back into the rhythm of normal work, but we try really hard to, socialize our staff, I guess I should say. We try to have fun things for them and have them engage with each other. On top of we try professional development pieces. PD budget is a real issue. We have a large staff, and so that's a thing. But we have other ways for them just to engage. And we have staff that are remote, so we're always trying to think about how to bring them in as well, our regional recruiters and such. And we use GChat and do bingo in GChat, and then send electronic gift cards to the winners. All sorts of try to be super inclusive with what we're doing and keep people engaged and enjoying their time at the office, so that when they're out on a 10-day gruel, or it's crunch time to process transcripts or aid, that they can come back and be like, I can't wait to see my coworkers and to do something fun in the office.
That's awesome. Thank you. So there are a number of different innovative practices the two of you have shared with us before we entered this presentation. Vickie, would you like to pick a couple of them and talk about how you've implemented them and maybe some of the positive impacts you've seen?
Sure. So I'll choose two. I hope I don't choose the same two Barb would like to talk about.
It's okay.
So, business process review, I can't say how important that is. And that leads up to AI, of course. But having a regular business process review for every one of the functions that happen across the enrollment management unit, and really thinking about that from not only the individual activity, but how that then integrates with the next downstream function. And so I think that is a key thing. We really jumped on implementation of that 3 years ago. We have now a regular cycle of review that continues to help us to update and maintain, knowing what our map is, what happens when, and how can we constantly be involved with improving, and also thinking about the tools that are shaping what we will do in the future. The other thing, oh yes.
Sorry to jump in. I want to ask you just to amplify a little bit more. When we're looking at business process reviews, often they're dependent on some of the, let's call it administrative or academic policies of the institution. Do you have a calendared or a regular kind of time when certain folk go and review those types of policies?
Absolutely. So I was earlier today just talking with our legal counsel on reviewing some policies that we have found through our business process review that need to be updated and considered differently for reentry students, two things that we've been talking about today. And so thinking about those policies in relation to business process mapping is so critical and important, because our policies work fine for a specific point in time. But as things change, we need to change those policies. And sometimes we leave out that last step. So thank you for asking that question.
Thank you.
The other thing, oh, yes, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, go ahead and share with us your other one.
The other thing I'd like to mention is the financial aid leveraging review. I think it's kind of the same way. It can get stale very quickly. And so we have been focused on a financial aid leveraging review, not because we have additional dollars to spend on financial aid, but because we want to make sure that we're spending them correctly for the audiences. And if we are in need of bumping something up, how do we redistribute that funding so that we are getting the funds that we have available in the right places? And so that has made a tremendous difference We did a financial aid leveraging review last year. We will continue that this year because you do have to give it a few cycles to make sure that you have gotten the result that you're looking at. And then it needs to be done regularly, very regularly. And with the demographic shift and the shift in public perception of higher education, we have to be very careful that we are not using policies on financial aid that are 10 or 12 years old. And I'll turn it over to Barb.
Yeah, but one more question on that, Vickie.
Sure.
I've heard some discussion recently on the term waiver versus scholarship and student perception. Can you share your views, and then we'll kick it over to Barb to share hers and a couple of her examples, but on student perceptions with those terms.
Yeah, sure. I think for the most part, parents especially like the term scholarship and feel like that actually means something for their student. I have not found students, even graduate students, to be terribly open to the idea of waiver, which feels like a different type of aid that is not necessarily positive. I think the other component of this is that scholarships may be funded through donor activity or gift activity and may be institutional. Waivers are almost always a burden on the institution and are very hard to create significant yield attachment to a waiver. And so I think as you think about that, it is really important to dig down into the waivers and find out what they are, why they are, and where they're expensed from, how they are paid for, in comparison to scholarships, which are pretty well controlled across most institutions on how scholarships are given, what they're given for, and the perception for our students and their parents are much more positive to scholarships than they are to waivers. I don't know if that's Barb's example or how she's seeing it at her institution, but that is how we're seeing it.
Go ahead, Barb.
Well, just to touch on Vickie's last piece, I think there are some things that are waivers on that we consider those two things that it's really kind of a back end thing for us. What we might call a waiver on the back end because of how it impacts the bottom line, the ledgers on the accounting side may be surfaced to a student as a scholarship. So a really good example from the West Coast is the WUI undergraduate, the WUI waiver. Essentially, it's a waiver, but we call it the WUI scholarship, the Western Undergraduate Exchange. And it's just a waiver of part of the out-of-state fees, but students and parents see it as a scholarship, which then we have some, explaining to do when they get their aid letter and how they see things hit their account. But it's worth it in the end to just kind of work with that lingo and what students and parents do identify with as being sort of cash in hand. Okay, so my two things, I'll pick different things. I really want to talk about the focus on student-centeredness. I think if you ask any of my staff why I do what I do, I think every single one of them would know that I do it for students. As a first generation student myself, as someone who didn't have a lot of exposure, and if I hadn't been an athlete, probably wouldn't have gone to college at all. It's super, super important to me. And one of the things I love most about UNLV is the mission to access. We're not an open access institution, but we do try very hard to provide access, awareness, readiness to our students. And so for us, the students are at the center of every single thing that I'm doing, everything, whether it's aid, and I know I've talked about revenue, so it seems like that shouldn't be, like that's not very student-centered, but it is. I try to put the students still at the center of that. Our communications, though, is what I want to focus on the most. We have drastically changed how we're communicating with students. We don't send big blast emails to our entire student body and say, oh, do this thing. And then people are like, yeah, I've already done it. Because what ends up happening is those that don't need to hear that stop looking at everything else. And so we are very, very focused on sending personalized, relevant, timely, compassionate communications to our student throughout their life cycle. So from, early on in the funnel all the way through to commencement and then trying to recruit them back as a graduate student, everything as best we can is very personalized, from information on, hey, you're not enrolled full time. You're enrolled in 11 credits. If you get enrolled in 12, here's the amount of aid that you're going to have that's going to come to you if you just enroll in one more credit. To apply for graduation, if you do it early, your aid is going to pay the graduation application fee, whatever it is. We try to be very personalized in that communication, and it's made quite a difference for us. A lot, actually. I truly believe that, especially last spring after our tragedy on campus in December, that had it not been for our really compassionate and relevant and personalized communication, I feel like we would have had a decline in enrollment in spring, but we didn't. We had our largest spring enrollment ever last spring, and we've continued into our largest enrollment in history for this fall. And I think that that is a huge thing, is our student-centeredness in that communication piece.
Barb, can you speak a little bit to what kind of tools you may be using for, this personalized communication? Is it through the portal? Is it through a CRM? How have you implemented it?
Oh gosh. Okay. So, most of our tech stack for communication is Salesforce. We do use the Salesforce platform. It's our CRM, but we use, various things kind of within Salesforce. We use the service center, and it is a Salesforce service, and it is for all of our students can log in and submit cases. But for communications, we largely use Salesforce Marketing Cloud, or we do have things that come out of PeopleSoft Native, which is our SIS system. But with both of those, we are looking for specific populations of students and are identifying what message we want to send to whom, and then sending it based on the information that we know about them. And we do push things back and forth between our SIS and our CRM so that we can ensure that we don't have information that's not talking to each other in those two places when we message.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Big questions here. And, it can come in a lot of flavors. Often it depends on the politics, it depends on funding formula, it depends on the boss. What are, Vickie, some ways that you measure success? And within those variables, what are some results that you've found? Understanding there are other measures, but what are some that are particularly important to you?
Of course. Well, obviously head count and credit hours, those are two of the standard, right? But I also do a lot of work on looking to see how many students are in our funnel that have completed a FAFSA, how many students are in our funnel that have opened an award letter on their phone. So we built, one of our IT guys built us a little celebration. So when they open their admittance letter, they get a little celebratory video that plays. And we found that students are really opening that more than you would ever think, because they show it to other people. And the really fun thing is, if they open it at least 25 times, they are 100% going to be here. And so it's really fun to watch those kinds of measures because it connects with the student. We do a lot of work. I have an internal dashboard that visualizes all of our metrics that we use. We are looking at specific populations of students so that I can track regularly and share out information about specific populations and where we are in the funnel regarding that. And of course, we look at all the funnel. I think the thing that for enrollment management that we do that's often a mistake is we talk about applications. How many applications do we have? How many applications are on file? Applications are great, and of course they're necessary. But if that's all we're focused on, if we don't look at these other measures that are part of that funnel, but they're more hidden, then we really are not going to be able to actively predict enrollment predictions well.
Thanks, Barb. How about you?
All of the same things that Vickie said. For us, and it kind of depends where we are in the funnel, right? Early and along the way, we're measuring engagement. As Vickie said, apps are apps are apps. Okay, great, cool. But what are they doing after that? And we lead score And we have 3 different kinds of scoring based on desirability, based on interest, and based on engagement. And that engagement score is so important about how a lead is engaging with us. And it is very relative to yield. And so early on, we have a better sense of who's more engaged with us and who is more likely to yield. But kind of following along that path and then knowing in your areas where you've grown and how that yield has been, linking it back to the engagement along the way is super important for success. And I think that part of it is also, are you seeing the movement that you want to see in the time you want to see it? A lot of times people think that enrollment success is measured in 1 year.
Yes.
And it's so not measured in 1 year. It's, people don't understand it's 3 years if you're going to be in a market outside of your own region, it's 3 years just to have some kind of brand awareness and 5 years to create a pipeline. And it's super important to spread that message across campus because not everyone understands that. Outside of enrollment management, we all know you can't show up in a year and all of a sudden get 100 new students from that place. Like that's not a thing. So I think it's important for us to say, here are all of the things that have been really successful instead of having that top down, which I try to keep this from my staff of, what I call the White House saying, you were successful because enrollment is up. And that's not the only measure. And that's not how I want my teams to measure their success either. So we talk about all of the things along the way. Is it more, we've done more outreach, we've had more events, our ROI on events is better, we've had bigger attendance, we've had more parents involved, like all of those different variables.
Right.
Thanks. And I think you just made me a millionaire because what I'm going to do is develop a coffee mug and send it to every enrollment manager in the country. And on the bottom of it, it's going to say that's not a thing. So when our bosses are plugging something, we'll just take a sip of coffee. I love that.
That's what I want to say when they ask me for the secret sauce. And I'm like, it's not a thing.
Not a thing.
Yeah.
Well, we've looked at results of our activities. Now looking forward, what's next and maybe what needs to be next? There may be some tools or some abilities or some things we wish were developed or wish we could do, or maybe it's just we need to do some pivoting, but share with us a little bit about what you think lies in the future and how we may continue to be more successful transforming lives through our higher education. Go ahead, Vickie.
Okay. Well, I think we are silly if we don't think we're going to continue to have financial pressures. So I think there are some people who think that next year it'll be better. Well, I hope it will be better too, but we will continue to have financial pressures. We will continue to have political pressures from the Department of Ed. We are going to continue to have those external pressures on higher education, and enrollment management is going to be forced to think about those as we build strategies. I think strategies are more important going forward than they ever have been in the past. And I really like what Barb has said a couple of times. There isn't a secret sauce. I think everyone has to build their own strategies based on the students that they serve and the service region that they're in. Where does the preponderance of their students come from? And then what does that look like? One of the things as I talk with colleagues across the country, I often hear people say, well, if we could only get these students. I think we need to focus on serving the students that we have and that want to come to us rather than the students who probably don't exist that we wish we had. And so thinking about the class that we want to bring in, the graduate population that we want to bring in, and really doing that well. I also think it's really going to be important that universities figure out the whole online scaling approach. And what does that mean to our academic side of the house? And what does that mean to enrollment management and what we do? And certainly if you scale online programs well, that changes a lot of our business practices and policies that we utilize in enrollment management. And then the last thing that I noted was state pressure. Not only will we have a lot of federal pressure, we're all experiencing pressure from our states, some because they have an overabundance to really find a way to help us. And some of them, that's not really a good thing because they don't know enough about higher education and they're not asking the right questions. That's on us, right? We have to find ways to help educate the people who are in a position to assist us, whether they're at the state level or the federal level. So I think that's kind of where we're going. We also have to pay attention to AI. We have to pay attention to the changing technologies, whatever that will be. But we also know we're going to be under massive budget constraints across most of our institutions on what we can actually implement and how we do that.
Thanks so much. Barb, is your crystal ball similar or different?
All of those things are so true. And there are two things I think that I want to layer on top of that, because yes, those are all things we need to be paying attention to. But the first thing I want to say is so many institutions are like in this identity crisis. Who are they trying to serve? How are they trying to do it? What are they We need to figure out who we are as an institution. Like, are we really going to try and grow online enrollment? Are we really because we're going to compete with SNHU? Like, no, that's not a thing. Like, who are we? What are we going to use online programs for? Same thing with AI and other things. Like, who are we as an institution? Know that, and help your White House know that as well. And then the other thing is a little bit weird because they seem to kind of contradict each other, but they don't if you really think about it. And this is when you're talking about strategy. And yes, I totally agree. We can't just turn the lights on, although that's what a lot of people think we do, is we turn the lights on and push paper in enrollment management. But that's not what we do. Within that strategy, be consistent, but also be continuously evaluating and willing to change. And I know that seems like it's a contradiction, but it's really not. If you can evaluate where you need to make tweaks, where you need to make changes, but you're consistent in the overall foundation that links directly back to who you are, you're going to have a lot more success in the long run.
Thank you. We have a number of questions in the queue, but I've got time just to answer two of them. So I'll grab the first one and the last one. The first one is, it's a little wordy. It's sort of along the lines of what you just mentioned, Barb, how we do things. Can either of you or both of you discuss if there have been conversations at your institutions about how education is provided to the students of today? So that you know what the traditional format's been. Have there been any kind of conversations about changing it, keeping it the same, that sort of thing?
So we have conversations regularly. Barb, I don't know what your institution is doing.
We definitely have conversations regularly, and we are often we pilot a lot of things. We love to pilot. I don't know about everybody else, but that's a thing. Pilot a lot. And so we're always trying to find what's the thing going to be that's going to get all the students excited about learning again, because they've just lost this luster for it. I don't know that they've lost the luster anymore. I always see the things, kids these days, they've changed. And I don't know if that's, somewhat, but not that much, I don't think. And I think that there are strategies, of course, and, we're going to have AI learning labs and all of these other things that I think are going to attract some students. But by and large, the discussion always comes back to, well, we still have to teach. We still have to lecture. They still have to read. They still have to write. So that's kind of where things end up circling back to.
Great, thanks. The other one has to do with planning, and I'm sure the two of you share this observation with me, where you've walked into a president's office and seen, the yearbooks from all the years on the shelf, and then you've seen the strategic plans from all the years on the shelf. In today's world, the question is, how long of a time span should a strategic enrollment plan be made to span? How many years do you think is appropriate these days?
None. So I think a strategic enrollment management plan is a living document. And by that, I mean, we review it every 3 months and we make changes every 3 months. It doesn't sit on a shelf. It sits on a web page so that we can update it and make adjustments to it. Likewise, our admissions recruitment planning also is updated biannually. And so I think that it's important to really focus on, as you said earlier, Barb, evaluation and be open to change. Be consistent in what you're doing, but always evaluate. And that includes a strategic enrollment management plan.
Hear, hear.
Same.
I mean, I think that some things within that's very true. All of the evaluation of how things are going, how things are working, and setting the longer term goals. I think I tend to think if we're going to reach for a goal, we need some time to execute the strategies to get to that goal. And so I'd like to see those set at, a 10-year increment, really. If we're going to have to, if they want to see X percentage of growth, well, let's talk about what that really looks like and back it down, and then work on the recruitment plans, we do our recruitment planning annually, and then roll that up to our strategic enrollment plan. And then the management piece of it is, as Vickie said, something that really is happening constantly. What message do we need to see to match that big enrollment plan? But the management piece of it, and sometimes the strategic enrollment planning piece is different than the strategic enrollment management piece of it. And so it's really trying to separate out those two things.
Fantastic. Well, I know both speakers are happy to entertain questions sent by email. You can see their contact information there. We're particularly happy today to have Barb Roberts from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and Vickie Cook from the University of Illinois Springfield talking about innovative paths to enrollment growth. Another great session brought to you by myFootpath. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.